Right now, the United States has placed one of the most serious military ultimatums of the 21st century on the table, and most people watching don't fully realize how close we are. On February 19th, 2026, Donald Trump stood before his Board of Peace and delivered a statement that stopped diplomatic channels across the world completely cold. We have to make a meaningful deal. Otherwise, bad things happen. 10 to 15 days. That was the window he gave Iran. Not weeks, not months, just days. And while those words were going out globally, the USS Gerald R. Ford, the most advanced aircraft carrier ever built, was already cutting through the Atlantic. Its destination, the Arabian Sea, where the USS Abraham Lincoln is already on station. Two carrier strike groups converging in the same theater simultaneously. This combination has not occurred in the Middle East since the United States went to war with Iraq in 2003, and that is a direct Pentagon-sourced assessment. The last time America assembled this scale of naval force in this region, it ended with the fall of Baghdad and the total collapse of an entire government. Now pair that image with what Trump posted on Truth Social just hours before this video went live, on February 20th, 2026, the exact day you're watching this. He specifically named Diego Garcia, the remote Indian Ocean base housing America's B-2 stealth bombers, and RAF Fairford in the United Kingdom, both by name. He said those bases may be necessary to eradicate a potential attack by a highly unstable and dangerous regime. A sitting president naming bomber bases publicly, when that happens during an active military standoff, it is not casual communication. It is a direct signal to every foreign intelligence service tracking the situation. Tehran responded the same day. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, wrote on X before the Geneva talks, "What is not on the table? Submission before threats." Iran's armed forces chief escalated further, warning publicly that Trump would enter a confrontation that gives harsh lessons if he chose the military path. So on one side, the largest American air and naval deployment to the Middle East in over 2 decades, confirmed by the Wall Street Journal citing Pentagon sources. On the other side, a government publicly refusing to yield while running live military exercises in the Strait of Hormuz in active coordination with Russia. What you're watching is not a bluff from either side. This is American deterrence doctrine and Iranian regime survival logic colliding in real time, head-on. And the countdown, as of today, February 20th, 2026, has officially started. This is not background geopolitics anymore. This is a clock with a visible endpoint. Before we go deeper into what Iran is calculating what the real strike options look like and why the Strait of Hormuz could reshape the global economy overnight, drop your answer in the comments right now. Do you think Iran makes a deal before the deadline expires? Or does this escalate beyond what anyone can pull back? And if you want the full picture beyond the headlines, hit like so this analysis reaches the people who actually want to understand what's driving this crisis. Now let's get into the mechanics of how we arrived at this specific 10-day deadline, because it did not come out of nowhere, and the details tell you everything. On February 17th, American envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner sat inside the Omani embassy in Geneva, not in the same room as the Iranian team, separate rooms. Oman's foreign minister spent 5 full hours walking hallways between the two delegations, carrying paper messages back and forth across a building in neutral Switzerland. 5 hours. For two governments that have been locked in confrontation for 47 consecutive years. And when it ended, the concrete result was something very close to nothing. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the sides remained apart on some issues. Diplomatic language for the core structural gap did not close in Geneva. Iran's foreign minister came out calling it good progress with agreement on guiding principles. The White House declined to confirm that framing in any statement. J.D. Vance was more direct, saying publicly that Iran had not acknowledged all of Washington's stated red lines as both sides prepared for the next round of negotiations. One meeting, 2 completely different public narratives from the people who were inside it, and that gap is itself one of the most important signals about where this stands. Both sides are managing their domestic audiences while keeping the channel technically open. Iran must show its hardliners it isn't surrendering. Washington must project resolve. But here's what changed on February 19th. Trump's patience ran out. And critically, the military assets were already fully in position before that shift happened. This is not a warning delivered from a distance while forces are still being assembled. This is a warning delivered while 2 carrier strike groups are already in theater. One of those strike groups is within operational range of Iranian territory right now, as this video plays. That is the entire difference between today and every previous ultimatum. The force behind these words did not have to be mobilized after the threat was issued. It was mobilized weeks ago, quietly, systematically, and with clear, deliberate purpose. Here is the one detail that should completely reframe everything you think you know about these negotiations right now. The IAEA the United Nations nuclear watchdog, has no confirmed information on where Iran's enriched uranium is currently located. Not approximately, not roughly. Zero confirmed data on the current location of over 440 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity. That stockpile, per IAEA Director Rafael Grossi himself, is enough material to build as many as 10 nuclear bombs if enriched further to 90%. And the world's top nuclear inspection body has not been able to verify its location since the June 2025 war between Israel and Iran, 8 months ago. So when Trump gives Iran 10 days to make a nuclear deal, the uncomfortable reality is that neither Washington nor the IAEA fully knows what Iran is sitting on. Let's walk through exactly how this happened, because the chain of events is one of the most consequential intelligence gaps of the past 2 decades. In June 2025, Israel launched a sweeping air campaign against Iran's nuclear facilities, followed days later by U.S. strikes on Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. Satellite imagery reviewed before those strikes showed something deeply alarming. Dozens of trucks lined up on access roads leading into the Fordo mountain complex. Iran was moving material out in real time, before the bombs fell. Fordo was being emptied as American B-2 bombers were still crossing the Atlantic Ocean. The U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency confirmed in a preliminary assessment that an unknown quantity of highly enriched uranium had been relocated before the strikes. J.D. Vance, asked directly about the missing material on ABC News, said, "We're going to work in the coming weeks to ensure we do something with that fuel." Read that carefully. The Vice President of the United States, days after bombing Iran's nuclear sites, did not know where Iran's most dangerous material had gone. IAEA Director Grossi was equally direct when asked by Fox News about the location of approximately 900 pounds of near-weapons-grade uranium. There is no information. 3 words from the head of the world's nuclear watchdog. No. Information. On the location of enough material to potentially build multiple atomic weapons. What this tells us is that the entire foundation of the Geneva talks rests on an enormous unresolved unknown sitting at the very center of these negotiations. Washington is demanding that Iran disclose its stockpile, halt enrichment, and transfer the material out of the country, ideally to a third party under IAEA supervision. Iran formally rejected that American framework on February 14, 2026, categorically refusing to transfer its 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium to any foreign location. Iran's stated position is that domestic enrichment is a non-negotiable sovereign right, protected under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. This is not a new position. It is a structural red line that every Iranian government, reformist, or hardline has held for over 2 decades without a single exception. In my view, this is the single most important dynamic that both sides are consistently understating in the public framing of these negotiations. Trump's demand is zero enrichment on Iranian soil. Iran's red line is the right to enrich as a sovereign nation. These positions are not close, so they are structurally opposite. The gap between 3.67%, the 2015 deal ceiling, and zero enrichment is enormous in diplomatic terms. Both sides know exactly how far apart they actually are. Now, here's the number that makes this gap even harder to bridge: 60%. That is the level at which Iran was enriching uranium before the June 2025 strikes. Enriching uranium from 0 to 60% represents over 90% of the total technical work required to reach weapons grade. That single figure explains everything about the urgency. The Arms Control Association confirmed as of late 2024 that Iran could produce enough weapons-grade uranium for 5 to 6 bombs in less than 2 weeks from its stockpile. That breakout timeline, under 2 weeks, is essentially what has driven the entire urgency of American and Israeli policy toward Iran for the past 18 months. 2 weeks. That is the window between Iran making a political decision to weaponize and having enough fissile material to proceed. Not years, not months, weeks. Now layer in the fact that the IAEA has been blocked from verifying Iran's current levels since June 2025, meaning 8 full months of zero independently confirmed data. The last hard IAEA number was 440.9 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium as of September 2025, before Iran shut inspectors out of every war-affected facility entirely. Iran told the IAEA directly that any future cooperation is conditional on the decision of the Supreme National Security Council, meaning Khamenei himself controls the access, so the inspectors cannot confirm the current stockpile size, cannot confirm where the material is stored, and the Geneva talks are negotiating limits on something nobody can see. Washington is asking Iran to prove it has stopped doing something that Washington cannot independently confirm Iran is or isn't currently doing right now. That structural problem cannot be solved at a negotiating table in Geneva. It requires verified trust, and both sides have acknowledged the trust deficit is deep and real. The White House was briefed this week that the U.S. military could be ready to strike Iran as early as this weekend. That is not speculation. That is CNN, citing sources familiar with the matter, published February 19th, 2026, one day before this video. Not in weeks. Not pending further deployment. This weekend. The operational window for a military strike on Iran is measured in days. To understand what that really means, you need to understand what has been quietly assembled in the region over the past 3 weeks. As of today, the U.S. has 12 surface combat vessels in the CENTCOM theater, anchored by the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. Each Arleigh Burke destroyer in that group carries more than 90 Tomahawk cruise missiles, GPS-guided, accurate within 10 feet, range of 1,000 miles. The Lincoln's air wing includes F-35C stealth fighters, F-A-18 Super Hornets, and EA-18G Growler jets designed specifically to suppress enemy radar. Add the Gerald R. Ford, currently crossing the Atlantic, carrying F-35Cs and the most advanced carrier strike package the U.S. Navy has ever deployed. 6 F-22 Raptors transited the Atlantic to RAF Lakenheath in the UK on February 17th. Public flight trackers confirmed the movement in real time. That specific detail matters. In June 2025, during Operation Midnight Hammer, F-22s made an identical Atlantic crossing exactly 4 days before the B-2 strikes. Mark Cancian, retired Marine Colonel and senior advisor at CSIS, told Al Jazeera directly, "Watch any movement by B-2s. That would indicate a Midnight Hammer replay." B-2 Spirit stealth bombers fly from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. They carry the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator. Each bomb weighs 30,000 pounds. That weapon exists for one specific purpose: destroying hardened underground facilities buried under hundreds of feet of reinforced concrete and solid granite. Fordo, Iran's most protected nuclear site, is cut 280 feet into a granite mountain. In June 2025, 7 B-2s dropped 12 of those bombs on that single target. Iran then publicly claimed some bombs did not detonate, and used that claim as the stated reason IAEA inspectors cannot enter the facility to this day. Whether that is true or a deliberate strategy, the effect is the same. Iran has used the rubble of its own bombed facility to block the very inspections being demanded in Geneva. Now here is what is fundamentally different about this round compared to June 2025, and this is where every military analyst is focused most intently right now. Reuters reported this week, citing 2 U.S. officials, that the current planning covers sustained weeks-long operations, not a single overnight strike like Midnight Hammer. One U.S. official told Reuters the U.S. military could hit Iranian state and security facilities, not just nuclear infrastructure. That is a different operation entirely. In June 2025, the target was surgical, nuclear facilities only. What is being planned now includes IRGC headquarters, air defense sites, naval bases, and regime infrastructure. In my view, the expansion from a nuclear-only to regime infrastructure targeting is the most significant escalation signal buried inside this entire military buildup. Because Iran's response changes completely if a strike is perceived not as an attack on weapons capability, but as an attempt to destabilize or remove the government itself. And there is one variable that connects this military standoff directly to the finances of every single person watching this video, regardless of where they live. The Strait of Hormuz, 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest. The navigable shipping lane is just 2.2 miles across, one of the most critical choke points on Earth. Through that 2.2-mile corridor flows 20 to 21 million barrels of oil every single day, 20% of global consumption, 31% of all seaborne crude trade on the planet. On February 17th, while Iranian diplomats were in Geneva, the IRGC Navy closed sections of the strait for live fire drills, the first closure since Trump's January ultimatum. Iran named the exercise Smart Control of the Strait of Hormuz. Navy Commander Rear Admiral Tangsiri publicly stated his forces can close the waterway entirely if ordered. The market moved immediately. Brent crude rose to $71.58. A WTI climbed to $66.53. As of today, February 20th, oil has surged 7% across just 2 back-to-back trading sessions. Oil is at a 6-month high. Analysts at Camco Invest estimate a $4 to $7 geopolitical risk premium is already baked into every barrel currently trading on global markets. According to Lombard Odier, a sustained Hormuz disruption would push oil above $100 per barrel. Global LNG prices would spike simultaneously, hitting Asia the hardest. Here is the paradox that defines Iran's Hormuz leverage. Closing the strait destroys Iran's own oil exports, eliminating the regime's single largest source of income. Lombard Odier confirmed this directly. Any Hormuz action is a high-risk, high-cost option for Iran itself. It would accelerate the regime's economic collapse, not prevent it. But a regime already fighting for its survival, watching 2 American carrier groups assemble offshore, may calculate acceptable costs very differently than a stable government would. That gap between what a rational actor would do and what a cornered regime might do under maximum pressure is precisely where the most dangerous outcomes in this crisis live. To understand why Khamenei will not simply accept Trump's terms and end this crisis, you need to look inside Iran right now. The picture is almost unrecognizable. On December 28, 2025, protests erupted simultaneously in all 31 of Iran's provinces. Not some, not most. Every single province, at the same time in the same week. That has never happened before in the history of the Islamic Republic. Not in 2009, not in 2019, not ever, until now. The trigger was one data point. The dollar hit 1.44 million rials on the open market, a currency that traded at 42,000 rials to the dollar just a decade ago. As of January 2026, Iran is experiencing what the World Bank has formally described as its deepest and longest economic crisis in modern recorded history. Inflation ran at 48.6% in October 2025, then 52% by late December. Food price inflation in Iran last year exceeded 70%, per the UK House of Commons Library. Iran's Ministry of Social Welfare announced in 2024 that 57% of Iranians are experiencing some level of malnourishment. Meat has reportedly become a luxury item. 7 million Iranians went hungry last year, according to data cited jointly by Time magazine, Euronews, and Al Monitor, 3 publications not known for exaggerating. Khamenei's response to protesters was not dialogue. According to sources close to the Supreme National Security Council, he ordered security forces to shoot to kill. Those same sources say forces were authorized to raid hospitals to finish protesters taken in for treatment. Those accounts have not been independently confirmed by all outlets. Human rights monitors confirmed at minimum 36 to 45 deaths and over 2,000 arrests. Britannica cited internal Ministry of Health estimates placing the toll far higher. The government's answer: increased security spending by 150% for 2026, while offering workers wage increases at roughly 2/5 of the actual annual inflation rate. The regime is spending more on controlling its own people than at any point in its history, while those same people become measurably poorer every single month. For the first time in 5 decades, pro-monarchy slogans dominated the protests. Crowds in Tehran, Isfahan, and Shiraz were heard chanting, "Long live the Shah," openly. Exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi called on Iranians to overthrow the Islamic Republic, and publicly called on security forces to defect and join people in the streets. The Islamic Republic is fighting its own population right now, while simultaneously trying to negotiate with Washington over its nuclear program and military posture. Here is the analytical point that makes the whole picture click. Khamenei needs a deal, but he cannot make the deal that Washington is actually asking for. Sanctions relief is the only thing that stabilizes Iran's economy fast enough to prevent a third protest wave that security forces may not agree to suppress again. But surrendering the nuclear program means surrendering the only insurance policy against becoming the next Muammar Gaddafi, and that lesson is seared into Tehran's memory. Gaddafi gave up his weapons program in 2003. 8 years later, NATO aircraft helped rebels kill him. That sequence is not abstract history in Iran. It is a strategic lesson. Khamenei is trapped between 2 existential pressures: an economy collapsing without sanctions relief, and a nuclear deterrent he cannot give up without losing power. In my view, this constraint shapes every Iranian move at the Geneva table, and it is almost never framed this directly in the Western coverage of these talks. Now add the variable that changes the geometry of this standoff in ways Washington has not fully priced in: China's direct military presence in the Gulf of Oman. China's People's Liberation Army Navy has deployed a Type 055 Renhai-class destroyer to waters adjacent to the Strait of Hormuz, accompanied by Type 052D destroyers. Also present, the Liaoning-1, a maritime surveillance vessel with sensors designed to track naval movements at long range, including U.S. carrier strike group positions. The Type 055 is widely assessed as the most capable surface combatant currently in service anywhere in the world. 112 vertical launch cells, advanced dual-band radar. Western defense analysts have said these Chinese assets could relay real-time targeting data to Iranian forces, effectively removing the American element of operational surprise. Days before this deployment, Chinese satellites photographed the newly installed U.S. THAAD batteries in Jordan. Beijing then deliberately released those images publicly. The message was precise: we see what you're building, where you're positioning it, and we are willing to let the entire world know that we can see it. China is not going to fight the United States over Iran. Beijing has far too much at stake elsewhere: Taiwan, the South China Sea, trade negotiations with Washington. But China does not need to fight to complicate a U.S. strike. Providing Iran with real-time intelligence on carrier positions changes the entire operational risk equation. One expert assessment stated that China's destroyer deployment has effectively ended the era of unchallenged American naval monopoly in the Gulf region. For Trump, the China factor creates a problem beyond the Iran file. Every escalation here carries downstream consequences for U.S.-China relations across every other theater. Any strike that locks two carrier groups in the Middle East for weeks reduces American deterrence in the Pacific, the theater that matters most strategically long-term. Here is where everything lands as of February 20th, 2026. 10 days, 2 carriers, one stockpile nobody can locate, and a regime that cannot afford to say yes or no. Trump needs a win. Khamenei needs survival. The IAEA needs access. And the global economy needs the strait open. None of these needs are currently being met. What happens next will not be decided in Geneva. It will be decided the moment the Ford reaches the Arabian Sea and Trump has to choose between using that force or standing it down. That decision, use it or walk away, is the only question that actually matters now. Everything else is noise around a single binary outcome. Watch the B-2s. Watch the Ford's position. Watch whether Iran submits a written proposal before the deadline expires. Those 3 signals will tell you everything before the headlines do.